Hello, I'm Mary Ashby, and my guest this week, David Tredinnick, is the Conservative MP for Bosworth, and Vernon Coker is Labour's MP for Gedling. Welcome to you both. And we're going to start this week by getting your reaction to this week's by-election. Labour, of course, holding on in Stoke-on-Trent, beating off that UKIP challenge, but getting trounced in Copeland in Cumbria, losing a solid Labour seat to the Conservatives. So, Vernon Coker, the East Midlands Labour Party did play a major role in campaigning in Stoke-on-Trent. Hardly a big victory though, Vernon, is it?
I think it was, as far as Stoke is concerned, I think it was really important for the Labour Party to have defeated UKIP. We have heard a lot from UKIP and Paul Nuttall in particular about the way in which they were going to become the true representatives of the working class. They would come into the Midlands and the north of England to the traditional Labour seats, and they were going to beat us in those seats. And there we have Paul Nuttall, leader of UKIP, going to what he saw as one of the biggest majorities for Brexit in the whole of the country, let alone the East Midlands. He goes there and he loses. So from that point of view,
he's not done yet, though.
Well, he may not be done yet, but he was done in Stoke, and he was going to win there. Copeland, not a good result, it has to be said.
No, you were campaigning with Jeremy Corbyn in Stoke, though, and that can't have been easy, can it? Given your situation that you resigned from his cabinet. Well,
he's the leader of the party. He was elected by the party, so in that sense, you campaign with the leader of the party, and we campaigned hard there in Stoke. Obviously, made sure people were aware of our position on that, but we also exposed Paul Nuttall for some of the things that he'd said, and thankfully we got the result that we wanted. OK,
David Tredinnick, some quiet satisfaction, I'm guessing, amongst Conservatives, but maybe Labour's result in Stoke proved that they're actually going to be harder to defeat than expected.
If UKIP had put up a better candidate, the Conservatives would have won Stoke, because the Conservative vote held up, and it was only because UKIP were unable to get at the Labour vote that we didn't win. And in Copeland, we had the best result since 1878. And not only that, we've strengthened the Prime Minister's hand immeasurably in negotiations in Brexit. So there are international ramifications here in that she is now the strongest leader in Europe because she has a mandate that no Prime Minister has had for 100 years, and that is winning a seat from the opposition when in government.
OK, well, Vernon, you know, obviously there's going to be an awful lot of browbeating after the result in Copeland. John Ashworth's Twitter comment that this was so disappointing is a bit of an understatement, really, isn't it? Lifelong Labour supporters turning their back on the party after more than 80 years.
Well, it'd be ridiculous to say it was anything other than a bad result for Labour in Copeland. It was a bad result. We had a good local campaign, a good candidate, but in the end, we lost the vote.
Was that down to Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, there was an issue around nuclear power and our support for that, although we tried to reassure people for that. And clearly, we're going to have to think long and hard about the way in which we respond to that defeat and the way in which we persuade people that the Labour Party has some of the answers to the problems they have.
Certainly before the May elections, which aren't that long off now. Next, the amount we pay to our local councils is set to rise, but local authorities are still warning we'll see cuts to services. Councils have been working out their tax charges for the coming year, with increases of up to £1 a week for some, but they warn they still don't have enough money to pay for all the services they supply. Our political reporters have been taking a look at what that means across the East Midlands.
How we care for the elderly and the disabled has become the major issue to affect all of our councils. In Nottingham, adult social care accounts for around a third of the city's spending, and some of that goes to pay for centres like this, the Martin Jackerman Centre in Aspley, that provides specialist care for those with physical or learning disabilities. Labour-controlled Nottingham City Council have criticised the government for what they say are unfair cuts that mean disadvantaged areas like Nottingham are missing out to the more affluent south.
The poorer the area, the more they've lost. The poorest areas in this country, and Nottingham is the 20th, right, have lost millions. It's a scandal that has yet to be told. There's billions and billions being transferred from the north and the Midlands to the south.
And it's a similar picture in the county, with Labour leader Alan Rhodes writing to the Chancellor last week, urging him to address what he called the funding crisis facing our social services. Nottinghamshire County Council has lost around £200 million in funding since 2010 and are proposing a rising council tax of around 99p a week. In Nottingham City, it'll be an extra £1 a week on the average council tax bill to make up for losing £82 million in funding in the last 4 years.
Derby City Council has a budget shortfall of £14 million this year, so it's cutting back on non-statutory services. That's the things it doesn't have to do by law, and instead asking for the public's help to crowd-fund the money. Now, charities and individuals will be able to apply for that funding to pay for, well, pretty much anything from self-defence classes to flower beds and help for the homeless. The project's costing £45,000 to set up, and the council's putting in £60,000 of funding to help those appeals along. Now, there's only one problem with the whole crowdfunding model, and that's this. Who fancies putting their hands in their pockets? Now over to Tim Parker for the picture in Leicestershire.
Here in Leicester and Leicestershire, we've already seen some big budget cuts across community services. Let's take a look at some of the figures. In Leicestershire, they've made budget cuts of £161 million since 2010. They need to save a further £66 million by 2020, of which £23 million has yet to be identified. Leicester City Council says it has had to make budget cuts of £100 million between 2010 and 2016. Its target was to save a further £55 million by 2020. £22 million of this has yet to be identified. Here in Leicestershire, we've already seen the closure and demolition of the Mining Museum in Snibston, and our smallest libraries in the county are being handed over to communities to run, like this one in Thurmaston, and a couple of the volunteers here are with me now. Carol, first of all, do you think it's right that local people should be running services like this?
No, the council should run it, but as there's not the money available to run it, the only way we can do it is having volunteers.
Well, Joe is 16, you're volunteering here as well. Why?
This is for my Duke of Edinburgh Silver Award, and I want to help towards the local community and to complete my award.
Excellent, thank you. A couple of volunteers here in Thurmaston. All 39 of Leicestershire's smallest libraries will be handed over to their local communities in the next few months. This is Tim Parker in Leicestershire.
So in Leicestershire, David, a Conservative council, as you well know, one of the lowest funded per head in the whole of the country. They are regularly lobbying MPs like yourself. Are you listening?
Yes, successfully, because we are about to see a change in the funding for councils, a much fairer system. We have lobbied long and hard to get better resources.
In what way will it be fairer?
Well, it'll be fairer because money will be distributed more in accordance with need, and there will be special considerations to take into consideration rural parts. So there will be improvements. One of the things that has happened in answer to public concern is increased funding for social care as we go through the transition where we bring social care and the health budgets together under the auspices of the doctors' organisations. So it's not all bad news. As far as volunteers are concerned in libraries, surely it's better to let the community put people in to keep them running.
Well, in some cases there isn't any choice, as we heard in our film there, but we also heard, didn't we, the Deputy Leader of Nottingham City Council, Graham Chapman, saying that local authorities in the East Midlands are getting no help from the government to cope with cuts, while better off councils down in the south of the country are. And he's described that as a national scandal.
Well, he might say that, but he's wrong. There will be a fairer distribution of rates across the country. At the moment now, some of the major cities get twice as much money per individual than people in my constituency, for example, who have areas of deprivation that are just the same as some in Birmingham.
You don't feel that the East Midlands is losing out then?
The East Midlands will have a fairer system in the future and has been deprived, and part of that goes back to the funding arrangements set in train by the Labour government.
Well, it doesn't matter who you talk to, whether it's the local government association, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, or any of the local authorities, be they Tory or Labour or whatever, in Leicestershire, Derbyshire or Nottinghamshire. They all recognise that the system is unfair, we're unfairly funded, the South gets better funding than we do, and even under the fairer funding arrangements that David's talking about, that won't change. There'll still be a discrepancy, and it will mean that people in Leicestershire, people in Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire and in the cities, they will actually receive a worse level of service. We simply won't get the level of funding we need, whether it's social care, whether it's housing, whether it's the libraries. I mean, the idea that we have community volunteers looking after libraries because it's a good policy decision, it's nothing to do with policy. It's because it's the only way of actually ensuring they stay open.
And that's the truth of that, isn't it, David? You might say it's a positive, but other people see a
It's not a
negative of that
policy.
too?
There's a change here. Younger people are not going to libraries, they're going online. So there's a
They
decline in
can't go to
demand.
libraries if they're not open though, can they?
There is a decline in demand for libraries, so you're not going to have the demand you used to have. But I very much welcome the idea of local people helping to save local libraries when they are targets for reductions in funding.
But David, they're only doing that because otherwise it will close. It's not. This is a good thing to do. We want, everybody wants volunteering, but it's to supplement services. It's not as a replacement for essential services. Surely.
Well, if you've got a county-funded library and there are pressures on budget, surely it's better that local people who love books help in the libraries rather than see the libraries closed.
Should Labour councils be going along with these cuts in the first place anyway? I mean, shouldn't you be
Well, it's
resisting
illegal.
some of the government's
Well, you have
policies?
to balance your budget because it's illegal not to, and nobody is suggesting anyone should act illegally. But Labour councils up and down the country, including in our own region, our own area, are doing what they can to protect the people they represent from the worst of the excesses of the Tory government.
Well, the Conservatives in Derbyshire say that the council should be taking money out of its reserves right now to lessen the impact of the cuts. The council's actually breaking into £17 million, but the Tories say that they could actually be taking more. Is that a wise thing to suggest?
Well, there are always choices that you can make, and the level of reserves is one that individual councils will take. But the reality is that if you look at each of the hospitals, for example, in our region, just take Nottingham University Hospital, there are people, on average 52 people a day, who cannot get out of hospital because there aren't the social care support mechanisms available to them. It's a regional and national scandal, and the government simply turn around and say, we've provided a bit of money, councils can put their tax up by 3%. The reality is there's a crisis.
With social care, it's obviously one of the biggest concerns we're facing right now, isn't it?
The Health and Social Care Act was taken through in the last Parliament, which I monitored as a member of the Health Committee, and I chaired it for a time, will bring together health and social care. We have a huge increase in demand for services because people are living longer and they require more care. So one of the things we have to do is encourage people to look after themselves. They can do that by not getting overweight, by taking exercise. There needs to be education, and we don't have that now. And there are other systems such as homeopathic medicine, which I have supported over the years, where you can keep a box of remedies at home. Try treating yourself before you even get to your doctor.
But that would solve what?
Well, it would solve one of the problems is demand on doctors. It just keeps on going up. But in
we haven't got a social care crisis because the elderly are overweight. I mean, we've got a social care crisis because there's a shortage of funding. There are people who are medically fit to be discharged from hospital to go into the community, and they cannot go because there's not a care home place or a social care support package available to them. It's a crisis in our social care, and there's a problem with funding. It's not people who are overweight or they should do this or should do that.
What he's saying is that people should be looking after themselves. We should have a responsibility to do that as well.
That's not a social care crisis.
Overweight people have a greater likelihood of heart attacks and diabetes, which means they will spend more time in hospital and they're harder to discharge.
Some people would say that your government is just passing the buck when it comes to these austerity cuts. In a way, you're making the councils do your dirty work for you, though, aren't you? You're making it really tough for them.
Well, you have to have a budget. It's not just councils that have a budget. And one of the reasons there have been some reductions in supply of money for local government has been to make good the deficit which the Labour Party left us when they left power. And to have a successful economy with low taxes and businesses that are thriving, you have to keep some control over government expenditure. You can't just write cheques for everything.
Okay. Now, there's a new campaign in East Midlands schools to tackle the problem of rotten teeth. Dental teams have found that some children in deprived parts of the region don't even own a toothbrush, and children younger than 10 have needed surgery to have their teeth removed. Here's our political editor, Tony Rowe.
Who's coming next? Hello.
At school today, these children in Nottingham are learning a lesson in life. It's a lesson not to take teeth for granted.
Right, so we're just doing a checkup for you today, Sean.
When you've got your big teeth and you eat too much sugar, if they fall out, then you won't get any more. And you would have to have fake teeth. So you've got to look after them
Southwark Primary is one of 3 schools in Nottingham being used as a pilot for what's called the Teeth Team. It's a scheme developed in Hull where the problem of decaying children's teeth is the worst in the country.
You get multiple extractions under general anaesthetic, which is obviously not a good thing to put a child under. They can have problems with speech. Obviously they come to school in pain, which is not good. They have time off school due to pain and obviously dental visits. This problem needs addressing.
Let's have a look, yeah, with the magic mirror, open wide.
The Nottingham North MP Graham Allen fears his city is not that far behind Hull, which is why he asked for help with this pilot. What they found in their work shocks the assumptions you make about modern life.
Some children don't even have a toothbrush at home, so that's what we're finding is obviously they're taking these skills home with them and hoping they carry on that message and that routine for the rest of their lives.
A combination of sugary drinks, poor diet and lack of brushing means that tooth decay is the main reason why 5 to 9-year-olds go to hospital. It costs the health service $30 million a year to treat children, often to remove rotting teeth.
Open wide like a lion.
In the most deprived parts of the East Midlands, there are examples of some children who've had to have all their teeth removed. They want to expand the Teeth Team project into every primary school. They say it will save money, but more important than that, it will help children's health.
And can you pop your head in there?
Back at Southwark Primary, they value the lessons and the input from the health professionals.
Goodbye.
The feedback from parents has been extremely positive, and also from our pupils and our teachers as well. So we are delighted with the success. Everything that we can do to promote those healthy lifelong habits is a positive benefit to all of our community.
A child with healthy teeth means they don't have pain from the aching, and they can take lessons home.
What we're hoping is to instil that good routine that they'll take with them and obviously teach their children to do it as well.
What will also help, according to the dental professionals, is adding fluoride to water supplies, especially in more deprived areas. The local MP is pressing for that to happen.
It's truly shocking, isn't it, to hear that children younger than 10 have already lost some of their adult teeth. Why can this be happening in the 21st century, David Trudinick?
Well, this government's introducing a sugar tax to bear down on the amount of sugar in drinks. I think that's really important. And we clearly got a problem in that parents are not taking their children to dentists, and there may need to be a requirement that they do so. There may need to be legislation to make this happen. We cannot have a situation where children lose all their teeth. It's almost a form of abuse. And
are you blaming the parents, or are you blaming the sugary drinks?
I am blaming both, but parents must understand they have an obligation to look after the health of their children. And
that's fair enough, isn't it, Vernon Coker?
Well, I think it's obvious to say parents have an obligation to look after their children, and clearly there's an issue of parental responsibility with respect to ensuring children clean their teeth.
But there's also an issue, isn't there, if some parents can't actually access an NHS dentist and their teeth fall into decay, that it's more likely their children's teeth aren't going to be looked after as well. It kind of follows, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, that may be true, and there may be an issue of looking at the provision of school dentists and so on and so forth. But I think there is an issue around, parents having some responsibility. I mean, clearly, as David says, that I wouldn't necessarily make it a legal requirement, but there are issues around sugar, there are issues around education for parents and so on and so forth. But clearly it's unacceptable, and we're not doing well enough at the present time.
We're going to be hearing more about the sugar tax, aren't we, in the budget coming up in March?
We will be.
What more can you tell us?
Well, I don't know what's in the budget, but I do know that companies are going to pay more tax if there's more sugar. But the number of dentists issue was dealt with about a decade ago. The number of dentists increased in dentist training, so it's not the problem that it used to be. But we have to single out. We have to find those children that are suffering, and it does mean people have got to take more responsibility for the lives of themselves with their health and obesity, and the lives of their children. We need a new culture, which is really the old culture, where there was more self-help rather than constantly asking others to fix problems, constantly going to the doctor when for simple complaints they can be treated with other remedies at home. I've quoted homeopathic medicine. You can get a box of 42 remedies. Try them out. If it's serious, go to a doctor. But if it's not, don't waste the doctor's time.
What do you think of this programme that we were focused on? Would you back that going into other schools across the country?
Fluoridisation?
No, that team going in, into the school
I
and
would.
advising
I think it's
pupils.
great. I think advice is brilliant. And also, what we didn't see was whether or not the children were given a toothbrush. Yes, give them toothbrushes and toothpaste, and a note to the parents. Try and make it easier. Toothbrush is incredibly cheap. Try and help parents. But there also has to be a demand that we don't let these children fall into a state where it costs the health service a fortune and ruins their lives.
Would Labour support a sugar tax?
Well, I think certainly we're willing to explore it. It depends exactly how it's done, but clearly there needs to be something done, and sugar tax is one option. About sugary drinks and so on and so forth. And I think the example you used of that school where that, I think it was called School Dental Project, or I can't remember, but I thought that was
the teeth team.
The teeth team, I'm sorry. I thought that was a really good example of the sort of work
that's just one school, obviously.
Exactly, it needs to be expanded and spread out. I suspect, as always, the cost in the short term will be more than met by the saving in the longer term.
Yes,
I agree with that.
Yeah, so you would be supportive of that then?
Well, I'm supportive of
more programmes like that across the country. What about fluoridisation, very briefly? Is that the answer? Yes or no? In Nottingham, for example?
Well,
that's not the only place to have a problem with bad teeth, by the way.
Well, no, exactly. It's across the region, across the country. But fluoridisation is an option.
It's
it's actually quite controversial, as you slightly
yes,
suggested.
It is.
I'm in favour.
Thank you very much. Time now